This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 228, originally aired July 6, 2016. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. I really wanted to thank everybody who reached out and provided the positive feedback for last week's podcast. We talked about sexual injury and how you can tap for that to provide healing. And it was a sensitive topic, and it was one of those things that the people who were providing feedback, most folks were going to do it publicly, but instead sent me emails. And so I really appreciate hearing from the community, those of you who were touched by it, those of you who were inspired by it. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, you can go to the podcast archives. Simply go to tappingqandapodcast.com. In addition to last week's episode, the entire podcast archive is there going back all the way to podcast number 1. Even though we are in the 220s number-wise, there are actually 290 audios in the archive, from bonus episodes and two-part episodes and a number of the videos in which we strip the audio out so you can just get the tapping parts to them. So all of them are there, absolutely free of charge. Just go to tappingqandapodcast.com. You can also download the Android app and the Apple iPhone, iPad, iOS app there as well, which gives you access to all of those audios no matter where you are. Also, when you're on the website, you have the opportunity to sign up for our 10-part guide on how you can use tapping to stop self-sabotage. Every few days, I send you a new email. There's audios, there's videos, there's tapping scripts, there's instructions. The reason why I've broken it into 10 parts and I've broken the emails up so you're not getting it all at once is so each time you get an email from me, there is a little consumable part, something that's super easy to use, that's going to put you into a position where you can be successful. Today's conversation is with my buddy Steve Wells. We had a conversation about beliefs and the way that beliefs impact us in the choices we make and how we see the world, and how oftentimes when we believe something to be true, it is. And not that we're changing reality, but it is the only way that we are able to operate in the world because we see it as true. And so we have a great conversation about how we can identify the beliefs that we have that are no longer true or that were never true, and how we can use tapping to systematically root those out. Before we do the interview, I just wanted to mention one more time about the sponsor of the Tapping Q&A podcast. The podcast is sponsored by Pain Relief Miracle, which is an all-natural spray, which is created by a friend of mine, Jason Laird, who is a Chinese medicine practitioner. It's really amazing stuff. I just wanted to reiterate what's happened over the last couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago, I went surfing. I burned the heck out of the tops of my feet because I didn't think to put sunblock on the top of my feet because I was in a wetsuit. It was nasty. It was gross. I used Pain Relief Miracle every single day. At no point did it itch. At no point did it hurt. And I don't know if you've ever had your feet burned before. Typically, you can't wear closed-toed shoes because you can't have pressure on them. It was no big deal. I wore socks. I wore shoes. A week and a half later, you would never know that my toes were burnt to a crisp. You can get 33% off your first order of Pain Relief Miracle by going to tappingqandA.com/pain, or if you go into the show notes, you can click on a link there. Because of the underwriting support that comes from Pain Relief Miracle, we're able to keep providing all of these podcasts for you absolutely free of charge, and we always want to do this, and this is an easy way to offset the costs of what it takes to put the podcast together. The discount that you get at that site, oftentimes when you listen to podcasts, you'll hear the host say, "and only for my listeners." And it is a lie because you'll hear the exact same ad on multiple podcasts. This is not the case. Jason has put this special deal together just for Tapping Q&A listeners. tappingqanda.com/pain. All of the information there, because it is all natural. Not only can you use it, but your pets can use it as well. So with that being said, let's jump into our conversation. Here is the interview I did with Steve about how beliefs impact us and what we can do to transform them with tapping. We had this conversation over Skype. One of the things that I have noticed, just interacting in daily life, is that oftentimes what I believe or what someone else believes about a circumstance is more important than what actually is. And not that I'm changing reality, but in the way that I'm going to choose to respond and the way people choose to respond around me, it's so shaped by that kind of what I believe about a circumstance. As you've worked with clients, as you've done your own work along the way, what have you noticed about beliefs and how do they interact with our daily lives and get in the way of us actually being what we want and having what we want?
All right. Well, you said not that it changes reality, but actually, there's a fair bit of evidence that our beliefs do change reality as we experience it. So it's to all extent, what we experience is reality as far as we're concerned. And the thing about beliefs is that they are filters that allow certain information to get through and they block certain other information to get through. And so we can literally be looking at the same thing and see something completely different because of our beliefs, which are effectively controlling the filtering system in our brains and nervous systems.
So if that's the case, then is there a way that we can kind of chunk the beliefs down or break them into groups so that they're manageable? Because, on some level, when we think of beliefs, we might think of a spiritual belief or a religious belief of some sort. And that's something that I can articulate in a creed. What I believe about the world sometimes is named and sometimes it's not. How do we kind of then wrap our head around understanding our beliefs so that we can see if they're useful and valuable?
Okay. So, it's a big topic. There are so many things that you're bringing up that we could touch on. But, one thing is that there are some things that operate independently of your belief. You can argue with gravity, but it's still going to continue to operate,
Right.
And so on. So some people believe something which opposes reality and they keep on suffering, and yet they keep on doing it because of their belief. I'm mainly interested in the type of beliefs that affect us, that stop us from having a full life, that cause us to suffer, and so on. And there are a number of different levels and types of beliefs. I learned this. I must credit this originally with Tony Robbins and some of the people from the area of neurolinguistic programming. For helping me to see different types of beliefs that are operating, and then I've kind of added to things as I've gone along in my understanding. So there are low-level beliefs that relate to specific individual things. You could call them specific beliefs. If I have a belief about the pen that's in front of me, that belief is only about that pen. Probably more relevant to say if I have a belief about you specifically, Gene, that's a belief about you as a person, but it won't affect how I react to other people. It'll only affect how I react to you. But if I have a more global belief, a global belief applies to groups of people, or groups of things. So I might have a belief about all men, or all women, or all Asians, or all Australians, or all Americans, and that's going to affect how I treat that entire group of people, and filter my behaviours to them and my experience of them, and so on. So there are specific beliefs, there are global beliefs, and in general, global beliefs are bigger. They affect more of your life.
And I think what's interesting, just as you share that, and I start thinking about specific beliefs, I know that I have specific beliefs about individuals. Not only do I have a specific belief about an individual, I might have a contextual specific belief about an individual. I believe you act one way at work and you act another way when we're at home alone.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so it's not just I believe this about you, but I believe this about you plus context, or you plus context equals even a newer specific belief as I try and manage that.
Oh yes, and you're really arrogant when you're with my parents, or you're really
right.
shy when you're here, or whatever. Absolutely, yeah.
So
there's lots of nuances with this. including the confounding factor that a lot of the beliefs that are controlling us are unconscious to us. So it's one thing to know, okay, there are different types and levels of beliefs, but sometimes we don't even know what's driving us, what's controlling us, what's affecting us, because it's become unconscious.
So if that's the case, how then do we start to transform those things? Because I think you corrected me very properly at the beginning. Just because we believe something and it might not be true, it actually is a reality. I mean, it's not operative reality. It's just reality because that's the way that we see the world. So if these beliefs are reality as we experience it or the way we're interpreting it, how then is it possible for us to identify the beliefs that aren't useful if it's just reality? And I'll put reality in inverted commas or quotes there as I say that.
Yeah. All right. So we got. Let me see if I can keep up with this, because we're going through different levels and types of beliefs, and I'll just try and finish that.
Yeah.
Then we're going to look at how do we identify them? How do we know what's affecting us? How do we know what's our unconscious beliefs are? And then how do we transform them? What do we do to relieve ourselves of their hold, because that's pretty much what it comes across as. And they constrict and constrain our humanity into a small, thin slit of possibility.
So unpack the different types of beliefs a little bit further before we start going into recognizing them and transforming them.
Yep. Okay, so we looked at the specific beliefs that relate to a specific thing, and as you say, you can go down to different levels of analysis with that, contextual and so on. Global beliefs that apply to groups. Then there are the rules that we have in relationships. So you could call them rules beliefs. My friend David Lake calls it the job description, in the relationship.
That's really interesting. I like that. Yeah.
And we often don't find out about, and we have those rules in cultures, we have them in societies, we have them in our, our own little families and so on. And then there are rules about how you should treat people and how you should not treat people and all that kind of stuff. And oh my goodness, the conflict that comes when we break someone's rules, And you often don't find out about someone's rules until you break them, unfortunately, right. Because people aren't running around informing people of the rules, although some people are. They see it as their life's work. But generally, they're like, oh, everybody should know this. Everybody should be treating people this way. This is self-evident, So there are rules, beliefs. Then there are values. And, in our other session, I think we looked at that a bit more. And, my concept of 100% yes, and the fact that I have a book coming out on this concept, which where we value certain things differently. And ultimately, values are what's driving us, because we move towards what we think is most important to experience, and we move away from what's most important to not experience. And those emotions have become hardwired into our nervous system, so that we are just attracted to some things and repulsed by others. And then top of the tree with beliefs is my favorite topic, is identity beliefs. And identity beliefs are your beliefs about who you are as a person, what kind of person you are, what you're capable of, what you're not capable of, and all of those things. And what I love about identity beliefs is that they affect everything that you do, potentially, because everywhere you go, there you are. And you take your beliefs about yourself into every situation. And it's funny, if you have a belief, I am shy, and then you go into a situation, you act unshy, you'll ignore that. You'll basically say, oh, that wasn't really me being non-shy at all. You'll do anything to maintain your belief. And the other side of that is when you change an identity belief, when you change from being stuck into I am shy to realizing that you can be first of all, you can be forward or backward, confident or retiring or whatever, and you have all those things available to you. It totally expands your life and your possibility in what you can do. So those are the kind of main categories that I like to work with people. And so, you might have a specific belief about a person that's affecting you, or you might have a belief about money, or you might have a belief about a certain group of people or things in the world. You might have your rules, beliefs in your relationship, and they're the ones that I get a lot of work on. You have your values, beliefs, which is what's most important to you. Really important to work that out to make sure that you are in alignment with what's really important to you. And you have your identity belief, which is about who you are and what you are as a person.
And so, as we go from these low-level specific beliefs, global beliefs, rules and relationships, values, identity, I can certainly, as you mentioned before, I can see how this kind of framework and worldview is very much informed by NLP's logical levels. I'm then willing to guess, or at least it would be at first blush as I look at this, that those, in the way that you laid those 5 out, in my own experience, I find that changing the ones at the beginning, even though it's work, is easier to do, and changing the ones at the end of that list are much harder to do. It's easier for me to change a specific belief about you than it is to change the identity I have in myself.
Oh yeah, potentially, but actually the process is very similar, and some of our significant beliefs about ourselves relate to sometimes they relate to a specific learning that we had at a certain time in our lives, and when we actually review that situation and realize that that was just a meaning that we took at the time, and so on, and get to see it differently, then we get to see ourselves differently, and we can start to make massive changes in our lives. Now, of course, if you built your whole life around being shy, then you have to learn to start to get out there and get into the world and so on. So there's a lot of you're starting at grade 1, and some people are already at university in that, but you're no longer blocked from going forward, and you're no longer held back by that belief that that you can't do that, or that you're not like that, or whatever. So the change in the belief can happen. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It really depends how many things it's connected to in your system, and we never really know what that is. Let me come to your question about how do we identify these beliefs, because some of them are unconscious. And my good mate, Dr. David Lake, and I say there's 3 main ways to identify your unconscious beliefs and blocks. The first way is to think about what irritates you about other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that one. That's one of my favorites. I love doing a forgiveness exercise where I'm wanting to forgive someone else, and I cross out their name and I write in my own name over the top.
Yeah, because of course the things that irritate us about others are the things that we disown about ourselves, and we've pushed away those ways of being, and that can be a real problem for us. It's really constricting us, because we're like, I'm not like that, and that separates us from people. And this is one of the causes of the great conflicts we have in the world, is that we create this separation with other people rather than realizing that we're all the same, and we all have all these parts and possibilities, and we are not those things. We are just, we just can manifest them in the moment, or we can, we can act like that at that time, or whatever. So number 1 is to think about what irritates you about other people. Number 2 is to get into a relationship with another person, and your partner will, particularly a love relationship, your partner will be bringing up your unconscious blocks for you all the time for your edification.
Right. Whether you want to know them or not, they are going to be front and center.
Exactly. And the third way, one of my favorite, is to set yourself a big goal, because the minute you set yourself a big goal, up are going to come up your blocks about, you can't do it, you're not that kind of person. So, and those blocks that are the ones that hold people back the most and often come up first in that situation are the identity beliefs. They're the ones like, I'm not confident enough to do that. I'm too young to do that. I'm too old to do that. I'm a woman or a man. I can't do that. Whatever it is, when you set the goal, I believe one of the purposes of setting that goal, and the reason why you came up with that goal in the first place, is because at some level you know that there's this issue that you have to overcome, that you'd have to bring out or release the blocked capacity within you to express confidence or to have power or to have energy or to contribute in the ways that you could do if you overcame those things that have been blocking you. So those are three good ways of discovering unconscious blocks.
I often think, to myself that if it wasn't for resistance to change, the change already would happen. And if I want to do something different, like a goal or make transformation or whatever, if there is nothing in the way, I just do it because it's the most beneficial thing for me. And so I gather the resources and I take action, big or small. But there's no question. There is no resistance for me to get eggs at the grocery store. It's not as if I think, it's over the dairy section, I'm scared of the dairy section. I just do it because there's no resistance, there's nothing in the way. If we're naming something that we want and we're not immediately taking action, I agree with you 100%. It gives us this great opportunity to see what's in the way because there is, otherwise we would be taking the best action for us.
Absolutely. And that resistance, the big barriers in life are not out there in the world, they're inside us. Because that situation triggers an internal contraction or something, which is ultimately a resistance itself, we can't move forward. We're the deer in the headlight or whatever. It's a beautiful description that you gave there of moving forward without resistance, and my concept of 100% yes is like that. Although when I think of 100% yes, I think of like when you're a little kid and you love going to the beach and your parents say, do you want to go to the beach, and the yes is 100%. There's nothing blocking you at all. It's like definitely all of my energy is going there and nothing is holding me back, and I think that we ultimately that state that we were in probably more when we were children, before we learnt what we could or couldn't do and what we are and what we are not, is more of our natural state. And I think when we do this work, we ultimately are really going back to that. That's what we're after.
For a really long time, I carried a big pink eraser around in my pants pocket. And the reason I did it was to remind myself that my transformational work was simply about letting go of the stories, the beliefs that I had picked up that were not useful, that were misinformed, that were disproportionate, or were useful at one time and are no longer useful now. And it wasn't as if I was changing into something new. It was letting go of all of this stuff that I had picked up along the way that just wasn't serving me. And so I really resonate with that idea that you just shared of we started at the place where we had and we've added on the stuff that is getting in the way.
Oh man, you and I are in so much alignment. I totally agree with you. A lot of people think that they're going to change their identity by putting something into themselves that they need to have. I've got to feed myself with these positive things and tell myself that I am that. When my internals are going, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not. I say to people, you don't need to put anything into yourself. We've got to, release the garbage which is stopping the flow,
And so I love the three things that you've laid out here, because they're super practical. Like these are things that we interact with, setting goals, recognizing what annoys us in others, and looking at the relationships that we have. So let's pretend I've been thoughtful. I've looked at one of these things. I've noticed some beliefs that I've picked up that intellectually I can now understand. It's not helpful or it's not true. But emotionally I'm still operating as if it's true because it's a belief. It's, I don't see beliefs as being something that is an intellectual thing. It's something that's a little deeper than that. Once we get to that point, then how do we then start the transformation process for one of those beliefs that are no longer useful?
Okay. Well, as you know, we use tapping as one of our tools to do that, and it's one of the best ways to help to release our emotional attachments to to ideas, which is what a belief really is. You know, you become emotionally attached to a concept. You know, people become emotionally attached to a word. You know, like I am stupid. You know, and the word stupid has has biochemical effects on you. So the first way is when you become aware of the belief, you start tapping, and the first thing is to tap on whatever you're aware of. And that could be the thought, could be the feeling, could be images, could be whatever. Just start tapping and follow wherever it goes. If you're aware of the belief, for example, as a thought, you know, I am stupid, then you can simply focus on I am stupid while you tap on the points.
And I really love that idea of just starting. And this is something you and I have talked about before, but I just love coming back to it again and again. It's not an issue of finding the right way to tap on it. In the beginning, once we recognize it, just recognize it and tap at the exact same time. And that's going to start to clear some space.
Oh, yeah. Well, how do you know that you have a problem? Just put your attention on that and tap. And in fact, even if you don't, just start tapping and see what comes, because the tapping will very quickly get to the other layers. And generally, if you've got a belief and it has an effect on you, the effect that it has on you ultimately relates to how it makes you feel. So the statement, for example, "I'm stupid," is only really significant in that it connects to a feeling of contraction or sadness or hurt or less than, or whatever it does, it has body components. So I like to alternate between, the thought and the feeling. And quite often when you start tapping on a thought, "I'm stupid," you will very quickly access the underlying feelings.
I was just giving a client some instruction today. She was struggling with tapping on something, and she's like, "What are the words?" And I'm just like, just pretend you're talking to me and say, "This is what I'm experiencing. This is how I feel. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what it makes me feel." And just going back and forth between those two things. Fact as I perceive it, how I'm experiencing it. Fact as I perceive it, how I'm experiencing it. And it just makes a really simple, efficient entry point.
Oh, yeah. And even if you don't have words, you can just put your attention on whatever you're feeling and just notice what it does. Yeah. And then just keep your focus on it. And the key is not to try and make it do something, to just tap and then just allow it to move however it's going to move, and to notice whatever comes up next. Now, some people, when they start tapping, they like the word, so they tap on, "I'm stupid," and they keep tapping and focusing on that. Or they flesh it out further. "I'm stupid. I'm really a rotten person. I do really bad things." They just put all the detail in. Other people, they just have the feeling of that. If you can describe the feeling stupid, "I feel stupid." And all they really need to do is just notice how they feel that, where they feel that, and just tap on the points and notice how the feelings move. If you're working on thoughts, you just tap and you notice how the thoughts change. If you're working on feelings, you can just tap and notice how the feelings change, because they do change and move. They won't stay the same. In fact, the only way really to get them to stay the same is to resist, and and then what you resist persists. So you'll end up with more of what you really don't want. So some of this is actually allowing feelings to move us, to move through us that haven't been able to move, and that's why we're stuck in this perspective. And so the tapping helps things to move, and you can go. You can spend all your time focusing on thoughts, and if that thought connects into feelings, you're doing good work. You can spend all your time just tapping on the feelings and find that after you do that, the thoughts have changed, and you can alternate between them as you wish. And when you've done a bit of this tapping, just focusing on the belief, however you're aware of it, sometimes spontaneously when you do that, up will come memories of where you've learnt that, or where you've you've had the consequences of that belief, or what proved to you that you have that belief. And if that doesn't happen, it can be helpful to ask the question, where did I learn this? Who taught me this? What experiences taught me this? How do I know that I'm a stupid person? Those kinds of things, and look for the proof. And the proof, of course, is the reference experiences. People in the tapping world are familiar with the concept of the tabletop with legs, and this came from Robert Cialdini. He's a social psychologist, and he said a belief is like a tabletop which is held up by the legs, which are the reference experiences which support it. And ultimately, since those experiences that we've had in our lives have proved that we're stupid, where someone told us we were stupid, or a situation happened and the conclusion was I'm stupid, because of this, because they're supporting that belief, we need sometimes to go back to them to release the attachment that was made, to see that was just a decision made in that time to connect that idea with the feeling that we were having. So you can ask, where did I learn this? Who taught me this? What experiences taught me this? What's the proof and where did it come from? And that's if you're working on the belief, for example, I'm stupid. If you have the feeling, and that's what's strongest, you can get to the same place by saying, where have I felt this feeling before in my life? And it's not intellectual. You've got to put your attention on the feeling, and while you are focusing on the feeling and experiencing that feeling, ask the question, and typically something will arise from that.
And there's two things. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. There's two things I wanted to draw out that really struck me. The first was this idea that when we're doing this, the sensation and the feelings are going to move. I think oftentimes we get this really kind of digital sense of what success looks like when we're tapping. I have the emotion and then I don't. And that's the only thing that success looks like is it goes from an 8 to a 6 to a 4 to a 2 to a 0. And sometimes transformation is when we're doing release and transformation is the texture of the emotion is going to change. It's going to change from anger to frustration. It's going to move from a tightness in my chest to butterflies in my stomach. And even though that might not necessarily feel like a tangible, it's from this big and now it's half that size and it's really a measurable change. The fact that change is happening and it's moving and it's transforming. It might be moving in its shape and its texture. It's moving to another part of the body, or it's going from physical to emotional. The fact that all of that is happening, I think, is super valuable. And I don't want us to miss the fact that transformation's happening in that moment, even though it's not just us getting smaller.
Oh yeah, movement is life, and I like any movement, even if the feeling gets stronger, because that's a shift. And of course, people often this is what happens. We have problems with handling strong emotions. We've learned that they're really bad and that they'll overwhelm us and so on. And so when the feeling gets bigger, often people will stop the process. But actually, this is the antidote. You need to continue. And the tapping sometimes can help you to bear with certain emotions as they move you and move through you. And this is what maybe didn't happen at the time when you were a little kid and you couldn't handle this. And so you kind of shelved it and put it away for later and, filed it under the category of I'm too stupid or whatever to understand this situation, or whatever it is. And so, some of those feelings are big feelings that we need to allow ourselves, not so much, like people talk about expressing feelings. It's more that the feelings need to move through us in order to process what happened. And so allowing them to move us and to move through us is the challenge that we have. We have we've learned a resistance to bad feelings, and as if they're going to take us over and so on. So one of the great things when you start tapping is that it can take away that fear of the fear, or the upset about being upset, or the worry about the feeling itself. Once we get over that, then we can allow the feelings to go and move wherever they do. And one of the places that things can move is, you might move straight over to another belief, which may even be stronger than the other one. These are just connected together in your system. So you don't just have a belief, you have a whole belief system. It's not just I'm stupid, it's also I'm dumb as well. I'm not intelligent, and I'm, and all this other stuff which you can get to if you follow and allow and tap and allow the processing to occur.
I like to think in terms of like constellations of beliefs, that there are these stars that in relationship create something together that's impacting me in a larger way. And my entry point might be just through one of those stars. The other piece that I think is really important to draw out of what you were saying there, this is the reason why whenever I'm tapping on my own, and this is just me personally, this is really effective. I always make sure, or I try to make sure that I have pen and paper with me at hand. So that as we're going through this stuff and movement is happening and ideas are popping up and memories are coming through and specific beliefs are showing up, I find it useful as I'm doing that tapping just to in a note, just jot some of the things that are coming through, because in that moment they might come and go really quickly, but it could be a piece of information and evidence that gives me another entry point when I sit down to tap around this issue or this belief at a later date.
Well, and because when you do the tapping, often you feel the way you feel as if you felt that way the whole time, and you completely forget that 5 minutes ago you were feeling something completely different to that, and opposite to that. So it's a really good way of tracking. So, I often do that on computer because I can type a lot quicker than I can write, and just follow, and then you can look back and go, oh, wow, okay, that thing that I started with, that doesn't affect me at all. This thing that I'm at now, that still affects me, but those things that I've gone through, they don't have the same effect on me, same power over me that they had before. And the freedom ultimately is not people want to go, oh, okay, instead of believing I'm stupid, I have to believe I'm wonderful, and so they try and put in I'm wonderful thoughts. I looked at programs years ago, where there was like you're supposed to stand in front of the mirror and say I like myself, and all this kind of stuff, and of course. If that works, now you've got two things. You've got the one that's still in there that you haven't released the program of, and you've got this other one that you've attached to. But actually, I'm more now about releasing attachments and helping those emotionally formed connections to ideas to release from the idea itself, so that the real power is not saying, instead of I'm stupid, thinking I'm wonderful, but actually being able to think the thought I'm stupid and have it have no power over you whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, where it just becomes these words that wash over us, and it's not something that's creating this entire cascade inside of us that's making it difficult for us to respond in a helpful and useful way.
Yeah, and even more than that, not just like, okay, I can think I'm stupid and it has no power over me, but actually to think that and say, okay, yeah, I can manifest that if I want. That's one of my potentialities, in this incredible, incredibleness of humanity, where we can manifest all these different ways of acting and being. But that is not me.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you. It's always a joy talking with you, and really appreciate your helping, getting some of this stuff out to the world, and love your work.
It is always such a delight to have a conversation with Steve. Some of my guests, we have to have a long kind of pre-interview to make sure that we're on the same page. I can see where they're coming from. Steve is just one of those people that we can have one or two pieces of information as a starting point and just go off and have a really great, useful conversation. I hope you found that conversation useful. You can find more information about Steve and the work that he does by going to tappingqandapodcast.com. Click on the link for episode 228. You will find all of Steve's information as well as all of the past interviews. I believe this is the 5th time that he has been on the podcast. The conversations in the past have been super great. You'll want to check those out as well. And in August, Steve actually has a book coming out. He sent me a preview version of the book, and it is super awesome. When that time comes around, we'll mention that, even if he's not on the show, just so you make sure you get that. If you have any questions, any comments, if there's something that you'd like to see on the show in the future, please let me know. I can always be reached at Gene, Gene, at tappingqanda.com. If you happen to be listening to this on the website, just go up and click on the contact link. If you happen to be listening to this in the Tapping Q&A app, there's actually a contact section. You can click on a link right there and email me straight from your mobile device. And if you want, you could even leave me a voicemail message. I would love to hear from you. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Monterastelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Monterastelli, Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Monterastelli or Tapping Q&A.